The Texans shocked most people with how fast their turnaround was in the first year of DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud. But does that mean they're probably due for some regression in year 2? Let's go ahead and discuss. And what's crack-a-lackin'? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so. And welcome back to the Deep Dive series, where we take a look at each and every NFL team and project how they're going to do in 2024. And today, I got your Houston Texans. But of course, before we get to 2024, we got to reflect on how they did this past season. The Texans opened the year with some growing pains with back-to-back losses to the Ravens and the Colts. CJ Stroud was pretty solid, but the offensive line was banged up with injuries to Laramie Tunsil, Titus Howard, and Kenyon Green. They didn't hang their head on defeat as they followed up those losses with dominant wins over the Jags and the Steelers, where they scored 30 points or more, but they would then lose on a game-winning field goal to the Falcons, but they bounced back pretty darn well in a win over the Saints heading into their bye week. It was at this point Devin Singletary started taking most of the volume of the carries in the backfield over Dameon Pierce. The Texans came out of their bye and laid an egg on offense as they lost to Bryce Young and the Panthers, but they would follow that up with probably the game of the year versus the Buccaneers, where Stroud traveled down the field in 40 seconds to hit a 15-yard game-winning pass with 6 seconds left. They'd win the next 2 games over the Bengals and the Cardinals for their highest winning streak of the season, but they would lose to the Jags as the Texans' backup kicker would miss a 58-yard game-tying field goal. Houston would beat the Broncos the next week, but lose rookie Tank Dell in the process for the remainder of the season. Stroud would have his worst game of the season versus a mean Jets defense and hurricane force winds. He would miss the following game because of a concussion, but Case Keenum was good enough to beat Ryan Tannehill and the Titans. However, Keenan wouldn't be good enough versus the Browns as he was benched for Davis Mills in that loss. Stroud would return the next week in a win versus the Titans, which led to a showdown in Indianapolis for the AFC South title. The Texans took the lead late and the defense made a stop on 4th and down to win the division, and they made the playoffs at 10-7. Stroud and company would blow out the Browns and put an end to the Joe Flacco comeback story in the wildcard round, but then Houston would get stomped by the Ravens in the divisional rounds. Most people would credit CJ Stroud and Bobby Slowick with the turnaround of the Texans, which isn't false. This was the most efficiency they've had at the quarterback position since Deshaun Watson, but DeMeco deserves so much credit for flipping this defense, who was 9th in run defense, 16th in pass defense, and 11th in points allowed. The coaching staff just did a phenomenal job, but their job isn't done. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be, because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first-time deposit up to $250. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. So if you're going to go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. The offense didn't lose too much offensively as guys like George Fant and Devin Singletary ended up heading elsewhere, but defense, they lost a lot of guys like Jonathan Grenard. He's gone. He's in Minnesota. Blake Cashman, he's gone. He's in Minnesota. Those were probably their biggest names, but also guys like Steven Nelson, who ended up retiring. He was a reliable veteran at the cornerback position, and they didn't really replace him with experience. You got Malik Collins, who was traded to the Niners, but he was one of the better pass rushing veterans from the defensive interior position. And they also lost vets like Sheldon Rankins, Jerry Hughes. You have Denzel Perryman. And I just don't think they added enough defensively this offseason, but let's just go ahead and talk about what they did add. We'll talk about what they traded for in a second, but let's talk about their signings, as their biggest signing was Danielle Hunter, as now he's going to be opposite of Will Anderson, coming off a very promising rookie year where he had a pass rush win rate of 16.3%. Danielle Hunter gives them a very experienced vet. Coming in at 2 years, $48 million or $49 million. You got two different numbers here, but very solid. You're getting someone who's a bit more disciplined than what you saw with like Jonathan Grenard. And the edge room looks really good. Like Derek Barnett, they re-signed him. And this, for Derek Barnett last year, the last part of last year, that was the best he has looked since his rookie season. Like his pass rush win rate was what? 21.4%. Absolutely ludicrous. And it's not like they stopped there. They also bring in Danico Autry, who, yeah, I get it. He's old. He's up there in years. It is what it is, but still hella productive. He brings a pass rush win rate of 11.1%, but a guy that did a lot of jumping from interior to out there on the edge. So you're getting a very versatile body type there. So like you really love how the edge room is starting to look. Kind of my gripe is when it came to the interior, they really just have a bunch of guys, and we'll talk about them as they come up. They add Azeez Al-Shaair, 3 years, $34 million. He's more of this old school thumper. That's going to be very good as a run defender. He's got a lot of familiarity dating back to his time in San Francisco under DeMeco Ryans. So hella good, solid. You bring in Miles Bryant. He's a backup save. He's a backup slot. I honestly like this. He's signing the veteran minimum. It is what it is. I don't think his play has been particularly that good over the course of his career. If he's just a depth piece, I think that's fine. But they bring in CJ Henderson, who I thought was reasonably solid for the Panthers last season. And I get he's never really lived up to his draft position where he was selected in, was it inside the top 10? Yeah, because then they took what was it? I can't remember the LSU edge rusher. Clavon Chason, there we go, with their second first-round pick. But Henderson, you at least know the talent, the abilities there. He signed in on the veteran minimum, so he's going to come in, and I think he's going to contend. There's a few different of these guys that are come in and contend for that cornerback 2 spot on the outside. We'll talk about another one of those guys on the list. We'll also talk about what they did via the draft, because that was actually the first position that they addressed was corner. They also bring in Mario Edwards, who's essentially going to be a replacement probably for Malik Collins. He's probably the best pass rusher they have on the interior. So I imagine that's going to be the role for him. Malik Collins is kind of a bigger hit than people, I would say people give credit for, because he had an 11.5% pass rush win rate, but 45 pressures, 7 sacks. That's a big number you're going to be looking to replace. So you bring in Mario Edwards to do that. And he's been relatively effective when healthy. So I like the pickup. I do. I truly do. They brought back Noah Brown, one of the better wide receiver 4s in the league. That's hella good. Jeffrey Okudah, he's coming in, and you got to think that he's probably likely going to be the day 1 starter there on the outside. A good fit for the defense, someone who struggled with injuries over the course of his career, but someone who, I mean, he was a starter he was just a starter last season for the Falcons. You got to imagine he's got the inside track, though again, we will talk about a rookie who's going to contend for that outside corner spot, but I like that they've brought in a few guys that can battle it out and replace that production that Steven Nelson, who was just, again, stupid reliable as an outside corner. I'm shocked that he ended up retiring this offseason, because I thought he still had more in the tank, but having to replace that, you're going to want to bring in guys with at least some game experience. And honestly, you bring in Okudah and Henderson, who do have that game experience, just not necessarily the consistency that you might be looking for. They bring in Fatukasi. He, on the interior, he's really just a space eater. He's going to do nothing as a pass rusher. He's just going to help him out as a run defender, just someone who's going to eat a lot of space in the middle. That's really all he's here for. Lonnie Johnson's going to come in as a special teamer. Someone who's got some safety, cornerback versatility as well, so that's kind of nice. So the Texans were very active when it came to trading this offseason. They kind of opened up free agency by trading their first round pick 23, to the Minnesota Vikings, and they end up getting back, well, a second round pick in this past class, along with the second round pick next year. There was like a fifth round pick also thrown in there, but they used that second round pick that they acquired for 2025 and turned it into Stephon Diggs, along with some other day 3 picks. But they acquire Stephon Diggs, which kind of money. That's kind of huge. You're just giving CJ Stroud even more weapons, but it doesn't stop there, as in the build up to the draft, they also acquired, actually it was right after the draft. They ended up acquiring Ben Skoranek for a 6th round pick in 2026. And I mean, I think that's pretty solid. Like, Skoranek is going to be a very versatile piece for this roster. Like, they went out and sought him out. So I have a hard time believing that he doesn't make the roster, but we'll talk about that wide receiver room and where and where not there may be room. But also the last kind of trade that they did here was for Joe Mixon. As I mentioned, they lost Devin Singletary. Dameon Pierce kind of took a step back last season. So they get Joe Mixon for just a 7th rounder in this past class. So you essentially get him for relatively cheap. Joe Mixon, I think, is only 27, 28. So he's not at that like 30 where typically the wheels fall off for most running backs. But at the same time, he's also running back with a lot of mileage. Not a lot of tread left on those tires. And let's not act like he's the best running back in the league, but he's a solid one. Like, the floor with him is really, really safe. And they're going to honestly get more consistency from the running back position than they had last season with Joe Mixon. But let's talk about what they did in the 2024 NFL draft. As I mentioned, the Texans, they didn't have a 1st round pick. So their first pick in general came in the 2nd round at pick 42, where they took cornerback out of Georgia, Kamari Lassiter. I get it, not the fastest guy. His 40 time, 4.64. But the guy is quick. He is definitely more quick than he is fast. He had one of the fastest 3 cones among this cornerback class with a 6.62. A guy that shows very good route, just recognition, understanding what he's seeing, being able to jump routes, and just kind of create problems at the catch point. You would love to see more ball skills in terms of interceptions on tape. But, I mean, dude allowed a completion rate of 37.5%. So, like, he's a quality corner. He's definitely going to contend for that cornerback 2 spot. Now, they had another pick in the 2nd round where they took Blake Fisher out of Notre Dame with pick 59. And I think he's largely a developmental guy right now. Someone who's got the length, he's got the speed, he's got the play strength, but you got to kind of polish quite a bit in his game. And it's not like he's going to be asked to start immediately with Titus Howard there at right tackle, but he's probably going to be their long-term answer at right tackle. So I like this look to the future. And I mean, it was at this point in the draft where you saw kind of a panic when it came to tackles, and you saw tackles get pushed up the board, teams taking guys that they liked for fear that they're not going to be available later, as you saw that with cats like DJ Glaze out of Maryland, where he ends up going early in the 3rd round. Caden Wallace out of Penn State, he ends up going early in the 3rd round. And honestly, I think Blake Fisher was probably the better option there when it came to available tackles. Just again, in terms of upside, like, the guy has it. Then with their 3rd round pick, they take Kalen Bullock, safety out of USC. He's a little light. I get it. He's a little light, but the ball skills are hella good. He had 7 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, and he at least plays with that physicality. He's coming in at 188, but he comes in and he's willing to play the run, and he comes in like a torpedo. It's just, unfortunately, sometimes, well, he bounces off ball carriers. That's just kind of is what it is. He's got an aggressive tackling style, not a lot of girth, so sometimes it just doesn't matter. There are also times like if he's challenged at the catch location, that he won't necessarily be the guy that comes up with making a play at the catch point or making a play on the ball. He can get out physicaled, but he came into this feeling like one of the probably the best center fielder option in this class. So I like the pickup for the Texans. Let's keep rolling. Let's keep going. As their next pick ended up being Cade Stover in the 4th round. Just ends up being a really good value pick for the Texans. I feel like the tight end group there for the Texans is now pretty girthy as they add Stover. They have Reverend Jordan. They got Tegan, like Quinterio. I don't know. He's more of a blocking tight end at Oregon State. I can't remember if that was last year or a couple of years ago. But like Stover's a good tight end, man. He's a good tight end. He might vie for that tight end 2 spot, but it was a solid pickup, a good addition. It was at this point, though, I really didn't start jiving with their draft, as in the 6th round. And I mean, to be fair, now we're talking about late day 3 options, so I'm not going to get too butthurt about it. But they take Jamal Hill, linebacker out of Oregon, in the 6th round. I had him as a undrafted free agent. He's real light, being a former safety, but not terribly light at 229. Like a very good athlete. I just didn't think I feel like he's more project than anything else, and he's probably going to be a special teamer again, a 6th round pick. So like it's not the end all be all. I'm not too worried about that. They end up taking Jahar Jordan out of Louisville. Wasn't the biggest fan of him in this running back class. He was running back 30 for me. I had a priority free agent grade on him. He was, on top of that, one of the older prospects in this class. He's going to be 25 to start his rookie season. And despite being 5'9", 193 pounds, he was kind of on the lower end of like the slower end of the spectrum, which was kind of surprising because he was someone that tore off a bit of big runs, but a lot of that more had to do with his explosiveness than his actual lawn speed. So I just wasn't a big fan. I mean, the forced missed tackle rate was all right with him, but I thought there were better backs on the board. They grabbed Solomon Byrd, edge out of USC, and I'm like, is there even room for this guy on the roster? Like, he's a good pick, man. I had, I think, a priority UDFA grade on him, and someone who didn't necessarily like test out well, but he definitely plays faster than what his testing numbers would lead you to believe. He's got a pretty good all-around game in general. Like, the play strength can be a little bit better with him, but like, you're drafting him obviously not to start early. He's probably going to be more of a practice squad body than anything else. Their next pick here was Marcus Harris. I actually liked this one quite a bit, as I mentioned earlier that Mario Edwards is probably going to be the guy he is going to be the guy that fills in for that Malik Collins role as this pass rushing interior player. Harris is right up there. Like, his win rate wasn't necessarily great, but his test numbers were hella good. He's got less than ideal length for the interior, but it's not like terrible. It's like at that top end of okay, suboptimal, you know. But he's someone that plays with a really big motor and gets after it, but not necessarily gonna like. He's even feisty in the run game, so his overall game might be a bit better than like a Mario Edwards. At least for the long term. But regardless, I thought it was a solid pick at the back end of the 7th round. Their last pick here is Ladarius Henderson. I mean, I could talk about him for a little bit, but he's no longer on the roster. I think he ended up being a injury waiver, as he had foot surgery, I think the last a couple of weeks ago, but it sounded like he should be ready by at some point early in the year, if not at the beginning of the season. But I mean, you were drafting him to be more of a developmental prospect anyway. He's got length, he's got tackle and guard experience. I think he's got good movement skills. You just kind of worry the play strength. Like, there's legitimately no sand in the pants when it comes to Henderson, but again, he's no longer on the roster, so there's not really much to talk about here when it comes to Henderson. Let's go ahead and let's get to this coaching staff. When it comes to the coaching staff, they did a phenomenal job last year, just instilling hope back into this franchise, into this fan base, and DeMeco Ryans showed why he was the head coaching candidate last season. Prior to that, he was the DC for the San Francisco 49ers. Prior to being the DC, he was a position coach for the 49ers under Robert Saleh. And you see Saleh's DNA all over this defense. Ryans, he also played in the NFL as a linebacker for about 10 years. A part of that with the Eagles, a bigger part with the Texans. He was drafted by the Texans. He's now back home, winning games once again for the Texans. And when it comes to this defense, it's a base 4-3. He likes his defensive line to basically win one-on-ones, but he will scheme some stuff up to their advantage via stunts. That's just kind of the Niner way. You see a lot of cover 3. That way you can stop the run by filling the box. You're also going to see a lot of like match concepts in coverage, whether that's via quarters or just man coverage. And you see a lot of speed in that front seven because this defense likes to move fast, whether it's like Will Anderson, whether it's Danielle Hunter, Henry To'oTo'o, Christian Harris, so on and so forth. Mario Edwards, again, so on and so forth. He has done a phenomenal job defensively with this squad. And then you got Matt Burke as the DC here. He's been around the NFL for quite some time. Formerly, he was the defensive line coach for the Arizona Cardinals. He did spend, I think it was 2 years as the DC for the Miami Dolphins. Fins up, baby, fins up. That'll come into play a little bit later as some of the guys Burks used to work with are on this coaching staff as well. But he's been around the league as like a position coach or a coach in some shape and form since like 2004. And I think his opportunity to maybe be even a head coach again someday isn't too far into the future. When it comes to the offense, Bobby Slowick did a wonderful job in year one. What you're seeing is the wide zone blocking scheme of Kyle Shanahan. This is a team that likes going into like 22 personnel. They use the fullback, for goodness sake. That's why we saw a lot of Andrew Beck last season. That's why they go out and acquire Ben Skoranek. And this is a team that likes to get the ball into the hands of their playmakers fairly quickly so they could go and make moves. But they're not against, obviously, attacking the deep parts of the field because they got guys that can do that hella good. On top of that, you do see a lot of play action. And he just did a wonderful job. He was the former passing game coordinator under the 49ers. He's been with Kyle Shanahan since 2017, and he's just done a great job. He's probably got a head coaching future ahead of him in the next couple of years. I mean, so much so that like the Texans went out and was like, "Hey, we're gonna give you a nice little raise just to stick around and help us continue to nurture CJ Stroud and whatnot." But let's take a look at some of the other names on this coaching staff. As you got Danny Barrett here as the assistant head coach, the running backs coach as well. He was actually from the prior regime, which I always think is kind of cool, but he was from the prior regime. And it's just kind of cool when a guy's able to stick around despite essentially the coaching staff kind of getting gutted. He's done a really good job with running backs in the past, and I think that'll probably be the same case, that they're going to probably even get much better production this year out of whether it's Joe Mixon, and maybe we see Dameon Pierce have a bit of a breakouts or a re-breakout potentially. You also have Bill Davis. He's here as the linebackers coach. He was formerly the linebackers coach with the Cardinals. Matt Burke was formerly the D-line coach with the Cardinals. It's just Bill Davis stuck around there for another year. And yeah, so I mean, he's here. Let's see what he can do. You got Gerard Johnson, former Texas A&M quarterback. Let's go. Let's go. He's now here as I think he arrived here last season, but he's a guy that's now starting to break into the coaching ranks. And I'm just kind of excited to see what his trajectory might be in the future. You got Bill Lazor, fins up, baby, fins up. Former Miami Dolphins OC. He helped Ryan Tannehill look good before Adam Gase came in and ruined him. Unfortunately, it's kind of is what it is. But Bill Lazor's had a lot of success wherever he's gone, whether that's with the Bengals. He had a little success with Fields early in Fields' career. Bill Lazor's just a very solid guy to have there on the offensive staff. Ben McDaniels, you probably sounds familiar. His brother is Josh. But he's in his 4th season with the Texans, so another guy that was with the prior regime, but he is stuck around. He was with the Michigan coaching staff as a quarterbacks coach, and he's also obviously the passing game coordinator here for the squad. Who else we got? Corey Underlin was the defensive passing game coordinator for the Niners. And DeMeco Ryans had him come over with him. That's kind of the thing when a coordinator gets a head coaching position, they like to kind of poach the staff he was currently at. So he brought Unlin over here, and I think he's done a really good job with the secondary, whether it's like Derek Steenley, Jalen Pitre. He's done a good job there. There is one more name I do want to mention here. I think it's Jake Olson. There he is, Jake Olson. He's the assistant to the head coach, and not in the way that you may think, as he deals with team operations, logistics, analytics, scheduling. So he does a lot of that behind the scenes. He was a big hand in Kent State, kind of returning to prominence for a short period of time back in like 2019. Prior to that, he spent a couple of years with the Yale Bulldogs, but yeah, he's gonna have a hand in there just with the not necessarily the development, but the creation, the building of the squad. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about this roster, starting with the offense. As per usual, you'll see my grades for each position over here. Let's start at quarterback, because some people are going to look at, oh, just a B for CJ Stroud. To be fair, it's for the whole position group. But yes, a B for CJ Stroud. He was a rookie last year. I mean, hey, I'm willing to bet that he gets better, but it's not to say that he was perfect last season. Like, he was hella good. Where I was probably the most impressed with him was how accurate he was downfield. I mean, that was something we saw at Ohio State. But like, even then, for his first year in the NFL, to be like a 58% adjusted completion percentage downfield is absolutely nutty. It's ludicrous. It's a great number. Most of his big time throws came on that. He had 20 big time throws downfield. He was just hella good downfield, but it doesn't mean he was perfect, because he struggled with a lot of things that rookie quarterbacks struggle with. You start with pressure. He wasn't that good under pressure. I do expect that to get better, but just saying, he did struggle when under pressure. He didn't exactly make the most wisest choices. And then he also struggled when it came to attacking the intermediate parts of the field, and particularly in the middle of the field. And to be fair, the middle, the center intermediate part of the field is the most difficult spot. It's the most dangerous place to throw the football in the NFL, because there's guys over the top, there's guys underneath. And typically with rookies, you try to have them shy away from that and trying to stick, well, outside of the hash marks. But they were willing to let him just throw last year. And he did a really good job of that, except for he needs to do it a little bit more effectively over the middle of the field. I think he had a 62.4 adjusted completion percentage in the intermediate parts of the field. So two things that typically rookies struggle with, he struggled with. Maybe not to the extent of most rookies, but still they were a struggle, and there are going to be parts and aspects that he needs to iron out of his game. Like this guy threw 17 turnover-worthy plays last year. I get it. He only had 5 interceptions. Doesn't mean he didn't put the ball in harm's way. Because again, interceptions could be very volatile. That's why you look at turnover-worthy throws, and you're like, okay, so did he kind of get saved in that regard? And it's not to say that 17 number is pretty high. It's not. That's pretty solid. It's solid enough. Probably about where you want your average to top 12 quarterback. That's about the range you want him to have him in. But let's be honest, he didn't have a lot of defenses basically take advantage of those turnover-worthy throws, whether it's dropped interceptions or just the defense just not taking advantage of that opportunity. So don't be deceived by the low interception count, because we've seen this with Dak over his career as well, where it's like 1 year, it's like, golly, dude, he really just threw a lot of picks. He was putting the ball in harm's way, but it was just like, well, yeah, and also all his turnover-worthy throws actually resulted in interception. So a lot of that was like, well, bad luck, bad timing. Because sometimes you'll look at guys with similar turnover-worthy plays, turnover-worthy throws, and they have maybe a full 8 less interception. It's like, okay, they got a little luckier. So you got to understand there's a little volatility with that. That's why I always like to look at and reference not that interception number, but that turnover-worthy throw number. But behind CJ Stroud, because again, the guy's ascended, but behind him is Joe Mixon. And essentially what Joe Mixon is, you're hoping to get a bit of a safer floor than a Devin Singletary. But to be fair, I don't think Mixon brings anything more to the table than what Singletary did last season. Singletary was pretty darn solid. If you go look at these guys side by side over the last couple of years, they're pretty similar in terms of forced tackles missed per attempt. They're pretty similar in yards after contact. So I just think you might have a bit of a higher ceiling when it comes to Mixon, but I think the floor is about the same, because Singletary he's been known as a very solid floor player. And you could kind of say the same thing about Joe Mixon. We could take a look at the rest of this backfield. Let's start with the quarterbacks. You got Davis Mills. I think he's good. He's a solid backup, and I like him here better than Case Keenum. Case Keenum, I think, is on the way out when it comes to his NFL career. Tim Boyle's here. He's just here. But I think Davis Mills is a guy that can maybe win you a game or two if CJ Stroud does miss time, which he did with a concussion last season. When it comes to the backfield, you got Dameon Pierce there too. Listen, I get it. Didn't play well last year. The forced missed tackle rate was still relatively solid considering how many attempts he had, but the yards after contact were straight dog water. They weren't good. You go back to his rookie year and just those numbers were better, more forced missed tackles per attempt. You had much better yards after contact on average. Much better. You're hoping he could get back to that rookie form. So, and maybe get more of a split volume here with Joe Mixon. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case, though. I think it's going to be Joe Mixon's going to get his pound of flesh, and then Dameon Pierce is going to come in and get scraps. You got Dare Ogunbowale. I know I butchered it. I'm bad with names. I'm sorry. But he's been around the league for a while as kind of your committee back, more of a special teamer. He's fine, but what he offers in here is this dude kicked field goals last year for the Texans, mind you. And now with the new kickoff rule, I think his ability to stick to a roster and actually have an active part on the roster is much higher. Because would you rather have like Fairbairn out there doing kickoffs, and then you only have 10 guys going down there, or you bring in Dare and he kicks it off, might not have the same amount of juice. It won't as Fairbairn, but you're going to have an extra guy going downfield covering the kickoff. So it's definitely certainly fascinating. If they keep a third running back, which I don't, or a fourth running back, I don't know if they do, because again, the fullback position is such a prominent part in this offense. Like Andrew Beck had over 300 snaps last year. Just think Kyle Juszczyk. So I do think they keep Beck, which might mean they don't keep a fourth running back, but they could very well do that. And the battle is going to be between Cam Akers and Jahar Jordan. I kind of already said my piece on Jordan. Not the biggest fan of him. And honestly, the upside is just far greater with Cam Akers. It's just his career has been plagued with inconsistency and injury. So can he stay healthy? So, I mean, if we're talking about a guy that's going to be a part of the backfield, I'd rather have it Akers and then just put Jordan on your practice squad. JJ Taylor is a receiving back, a scat back. That's what he is. Don't think he's more than a camp body. British Brooks, I'm kind of hoping that he sticks around on the practice squad. He's a bit of a bruiser. He was the second running back there with Omari and Hampton at North Carolina. Brooks ain't half bad, so I kind of hope he sticks to the roster. I think we should point out Troy Hairston, who missed, I think, all of last season with a back injury. Was it all? Yeah, it was all of last season, but he's like a edge / linebacker convert. Just a big motor player, but I mean, they got Beck, so that probably relegates Hairston to maybe a practice squad at best. Let's talk about the other pass catchers. When it comes to this offense, as you could tell, my grade for the weapons are pretty darn high. You literally have a little drop of everything when it comes to this wide receiver core. You got the big body threat who when Nico Collins, who proved he's more than just a possession receiver. He's more than because honestly, coming out of Michigan, I was like, okay, he's going to be a possession receiver that can attack the intermediate to deep parts of the field, just because he's not like the most fluid route runner. But if you give him a pretty simplistic route tree, for instance, a vertical route tree, then he's going to be pretty solid for you. But he showed on the short to intermediate, hey, I can create after the catch. The dude had 21 forced missed tackles. Absolutely ludicrous number. So he's more than just a possession receiver. And then you have Tank Dell, who gives you, not size, but a hell lot of speed, a hell lot of quickness. He has developed really well as a route runner, and he was already pretty well put together as a route runner, but someone who was more so that vertical threat, as his yards, his average depth per target during the season last year, I believe, was like 14 yards down the field. Let me just take a quick look at that so I can confirm it. It was indeed 14.4 yards down the field. But I don't know if he's going to be like the slot guy. He was primarily on the outside 70% of the time last season. But they might, I think we're going to see kind of a rotation at slot now with the addition of Stephon Diggs, who is still one of the most crafty and nuanced route runners in the NFL. And I feel like Diggs is more of that 50-50 guy when it comes to his time outside and in the slot. I think we're going to see a bit of a rotation. Like, hey, not only do we have 3 really good wide receivers that you're going to have to keep tabs on, but you're never going to get a great feel of where they line up, because we're going to be moving them all around. Because I mean, hey, when it comes to Slowick, it's a Kyle Shanahan defense, which means they're going to attack you and they're going to layer these plays. They're going to show you very similar concepts and personnel and similar motion. We're going to run a hell lot of different things out of it. Let's go over Dalton Schultz, one of the better, I think, tight ends in the NFL. Kind of a fringe top 10 tight end in the NFL. Hella good. He missed a few games last season with, I think, a hamstring injury, but what went on the field might not have been like your third or fourth option on the field, but when you do throw the ball his way. He's typically a very reliable pass catcher. No surprise that they brought him back. Let's look at the depth of these pass catchers because there's actually quite a lot to talk about. They have Noah Brown, who's one of the better, I would say, wide receiver fours in the NFL. He is very much a vertical threat. His average depth of target was 12 yards down the field, I believe. It was 12.7, so close to 13 yards down the field. He gives you size at 6'2", 215 as well. I kind of feel like Ben Skoranek, which, by the way, if I said Skoransky early in the video, my bad, sorry. For sometimes you just mix these names up. But it just dawned on me, I may have been saying the wrong name. So listen, if I get that comment in the comment section, I'm just gonna go ahead and timestamp it to right here. Make that correction. Ben Skoranek, I almost did it too. I almost said Skoransky. Ben Skoranek is someone that you can play all around the field. He's a very versatile type. I have a hard time believing and buying into that they traded for him. I know they didn't trade a ton of draft capital for him, but I have a hard time believing they went out and got him for him to not make this roster. So I think he sticks around as the wide receiver 5 just because of how you can utilize him. The question is, do they keep a 6th receiver, and who would it be? Is it going to be the reliable veteran Robert Woods, who had over 400 yards last season? Or is it going to be John Mechie, who essentially was coming off his rookie season? If you remember, he was battling not lymphoma, because that was Dylan Horton. Leukemia. He was battling leukemia and missed his rookie season because of it. He's a great feel-good story. But are you going to go with the reliable vet, or are you going to be like, you know what, we've been developing, get this guy. We want to keep him on the roster. That's kind of going to be a toss-up, even if they keep a 6th wide receiver. I want to jump back to the tight ends, as Brevin Jordan, I think, has been a solid receiving tight end option. I think he's been a solid solid tight end 2 option, but Cade Stover gives you a bit of a better blocker in that regard. And again, hey, guys, I love Brevin Jordan. Do you, baby? Do you? I'm a big Hurricanes fan. But he's also in his contract year. They're going to have to decide if they're going to pay him or not. So, we'll see. We'll see. Let's talk about, I guess, the backups at, well, I guess the guys that are going to be on the roster bubble at wide receiver. Xavier Hutchins, he's probably a practice squad player. He gives you good size, good after the catch ability, but very much when it comes to his route tree, it's very limited. He's either attacking vertically or you're catching him in the short part of the field. Steven Sims is more of a special teamer. I couldn't really tell you much about Johnny Johnson III. I feel like that sounds like a guy that came out of Oregon, but I don't think I did an eval for him. Yep, Oregon. So I couldn't really tell you about him. I'm not going to just sit here and talk out of ignorance about a player I don't know too much about. Quintez Cephas, big body threat, used to play with the Lions. Don't really know what since leaving there, I don't know if he's bounced around a little bit, but he's here. He's more of a camp body. And then let's jump to tight end, because I feel like they're gonna keep 4 tight ends. I think they really like Tegan Quintario, who was a blocking tight end coming out of Oregon State, a very solid red zone threat. So you just like that on the roster. That's why I think he probably they probably keep 4 tight ends. Dalton Keene, camp body. He was formerly a Virginia Tech tight end who tested really well. He was a part of the Patriots draft where there at the end of the 3rd round, they double dipped at tight end with him and Devin Asiasi at UCLA. Neither of those guys ever worked out. He's very much just a camp body. Now, I think the biggest question when it comes to this offense comes with the offensive line. Really, the other 4 positions. Anyone not named Laramie Tunzel. Laramie Tunzel is still is one of the best tackles in football, one of the best pass protectors in all of football. I believe he missed maybe a couple of games last year. Was he also a hamstring injury or was it just a knee injury? It was a knee injury. So, but it was only a couple of games. But we'll talk about the potential guys that can step up if injury does occur. But like I said, Laremy Tunsil, one of the best in the league. Opposite on the other side at the tackle position is Titus Howard, who I honestly think he's a better tackle than guard. I don't know why people love this guy at guard so much. I don't think he produces that well at guard, and now he gets to go back to tackle. And I get last year, a lot of that had to do with injury. You have one of the better backup tackles in the league in George Fant. So, of course, you're probably going to kick Titus Howard inside, but I'm hoping the play gets a little bit better, because if it doesn't, there is a guy in Blake Fisher that's waiting for the call up. I truly believe Blake Fisher is the long-term replacement to Titus Howard. Shaq Mason, he's not as good as he once was, but he's still one of the most dependable starters at guard in the NFL. I'd argue he is their second best player on the offensive line. You have Kenyon Green, who didn't play a snap at all last year because of a shoulder injury. And that really sucked because he was coming off a really not great rookie season. And he was down bad after that rookie season. You were kind of hoping to see something last year. The injury took that away from us. So now this might be like Kenyon Green. You're either a guy at guard or you're not. You're not. Juice Scruggs, he moves to center. He played left guard last year. But he was kind of projected more as a center coming out of Penn State. I like seeing him at center, but I mean, they got a solid backup there in Jarrett Patterson. Maybe not like the biggest upside guy, but just someone who's very good at doing their job. So if injuries hit at one of the guard positions, I think Scruggs probably gets kicked out and Patterson comes in at center. Not willing to bet money on it, but I got a feeling. They also got Kendrick Green as a backup guard here. This is a perfect system for him. A guy that moves exceptionally well. I really liked him coming out of Illinois. Just didn't really work out at Pittsburgh after being a third-round pick. And I think here he's just a hand-in-glove fit. So maybe even if there's injury at guard, they go with Kendrick Green. And maybe you don't want to move Scruggs to center if you feel he is your future center. So that makes sense. But I think you got two solid starter or backups there on the interior. They also have Dieter Eastland, which I first saw that and I was like, what? Michael Dieter's still on this team? Nope. It's someone else. Not familiar with his game. Not going to talk much about him. I feel like Blake Fisher's, even despite being a rookie, is the first guy in, though I think Charlie Heck is a fine enough backup. I know when he was in last year, it wasn't great, but he's another guy that's still kind of developing, but I mean the upside with him is backup. There's Cam Irvin. He's a backup tackle here as well. I think at this juncture in his career, he's more of just a camp body. Used to be one of the better backup tackles in the league. Last couple of years, he feels like he's kind of fallen off a little bit, so I don't think he makes the roster. David Sharp, I don't feel like I've watched him a ton. Was he formerly... No, I'm thinking of Max Sharpen, who was drafted by this squad like years ago. Who are you, David Sharp? Initially from Florida, has bounced around. Oh, not really. Yeah, he's bounced around the league. Okay, yeah, I'm not familiar with this game. I'm not going to talk on him. Looks like he's more of a roster body anyway. Chris Reed's not a bad backup to have on the roster, but again, he's on the roster bubble here. Nick Broecker, I really liked coming out of Ole Miss. He played tackle at Ole Miss. You always knew he was going to probably convert at guard. And in this system, like, the dude moves exceptionally well. But I think it's fair to be a little bit critical, or at least have some concerns with the offensive line coming into this season. As, again, you got Howard kicking back out to right tackle. You're going to have guys like Green and Scruggs, who are unproven at this juncture, though I would say Scruggs at least showed a little bit last year and compared to what we saw in Green with Green in 2022. So yeah, I think it's fair to have questions, but all in all, like the offense in terms of the quarterback and the playmakers are so good that I'm not too worried, even if some aspects of the offensive line do struggle. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about the defense. So part of me, when it comes to this defense, it does feel like there will be some regression, right? But they're so well coached, and it's not like they don't have stars on this defense. They got Derek Stingley, they got Will Anderson, they brought in Danielle Hunter. But like when it comes to that defensive interior, like, man, as starters, I got like Mario Edwards and Fatukasi listed as starters, but it's going to be such a deep rotation on the defensive line. It's kind of hard to completely know what to expect. So I guess let's just go ahead and get into it. You got Will Anderson. I talked a little bit about him earlier in the video. The dude's phenomenal. He's an ascending superstar, in my opinion. Danielle Hunter still playing a hella good football, and at this point, I mean, you essentially got two edge ones, even if they are like mid to low level edge ones. I mean, Will Anderson's only trending in an upward direction, while Danielle Hunter, I think, is still hella good. But behind that, you got Derek Barnett, who's coming off at least the best stretch of his career. You have Danico Autry, who, again, versatile body type, will be suspended for the first 6 games of the season, I believe, for PEDs. But, I mean, they bring back Jerry Hughes. Hey, he was lost, but now, once again, found. Dylan Horton, he's coming off the lymphoma, so you got to get him in football shape. So, like, there's guys there, but, I mean, your 2 starters are so good. You got, at the very least, someone who proved to be very good in your scheme down the stretch last season in Derek Barnett. But you get to that interior. I talked about Mario Edwards kind of being the Malik Collins replacement in this offense or this defense as a pass rusher. Like, the dude's quick. His last 2 years, whether it was last year with Seattle, 22 pressures, 2 sacks, or the year before with Tennessee, 34 pressures, 3 sacks. Like, he's shown like that he is a pass rushing option. I mean, unfortunately for him, like earlier in his career, he ran into some injury concerns and whatnot. And I get it, man. The guy's 30, but like the tread is still there with him. Like, it's not like he's got a lot of mileage just because, again, injuries playing a part in his career. So him as a pass rushing option is spectacular. Fatukasi is certainly going to be that run defender, man. He's going to be in those short yard situations. He eats a lot of space, but you're not going to have him on the field for passing downs, for passing situations. That's just not going to be a thing. So let's talk about like the depth, because I mean, I do think the snaps are going to be so freaking close between these interior players, because that when I talk about starters, I'm listing the guys that I think are going to be on the field the most, and it's kind of hard to project that with this interior. They're bringing over Tim Settle. I'm a huge, I wouldn't say huge. I'm a big Tim Settle fan. I think he's a very, very solid defensive interior, especially when it comes to the depth he provides. Like, I truly believe that he's very much a rotation player, but he's still hella productive. But he's another guy that's kind of more of a pass rusher. So I think we're gonna see Edwards. We're gonna see we're gonna see Settle on the passing downs, and then when Danico is off of suspension, I think you're gonna see Danico there on the interior, maybe lined up at like inside 4 tech. And then maybe you're like Edwards or Settle lined up a little closer to the ball. But I mean, for me, at the very least, I feel like Edwards kind of edges out Settle, just because the last couple of years he's had more snaps, and I think he's just much better at playing the run than Settle is. So that's kind of why he edges out Settle. That's why I give the nod to Edwards. You got Khalil Davis, who played a hell lot of snaps last year, and he was actually pretty productive. He's coming in at 6'2", 310 pounds, former Nebraska Cornhusker, and last year was his first year of significant playing time after stops in Tampa Bay and Indianapolis last year. He got some significant playing time and played hella good. So, like, but he was another guy that more so played on passing downs. So it's like, okay, then who's gonna be the run defenders here outside of Fatukasi? I guess it's like you're really relying on Mario Edwards. Well, let's talk about Kurt Hinish, who was I believe, wasn't he a UDFA by the Texans? And his snap total, yeah, it's a bit more split, but I'd argue he hasn't been particularly great. He's a fine depth piece, but he's not I wouldn't say he's particularly great there. So it's like, I just don't love it. I just don't love it. It's, you look at this interior group and it's just guys. It's just guys. But I don't know, man. We'll see. We'll see. A couple of the edge players I didn't really talk about. I already talked about Marcus Harris earlier in the video when we talked about draft picks. McTelvin again at this point is kind of a journeyman, but I liked him coming out of Arkansas. I believe it was Arkansas. Solomon Byrd might be able to make the roster while Danico's suspended, but I think he's very much a practice squad body. Ali Gay, a guy that has length, a decent first step, but probably a long shot to make the roster. Malik Fisher couldn't tell you much about. You got Feldarius Payne, formerly of Virginia Tech. He was a bit of a tweener coming out of Virginia Tech. He's more probably just maybe a practice squad candidate, more of a camp body. You go to the linebacker position, and you bet your sweet cheeks it's going to be Christian Harris there, man. Christian Harris stepped up his game as the season went on, played a hell lot of snaps, but I thought played really well in coverage, which is great. You knew the guy was a good athlete, and that's where you were expecting it to pay dividends. And I think it did in that aspect, but you still need this guy. He plays fast, but he needs to clean up that tackling technique. He whiffs on too many tackles. 16.1% missed tackle rate last season. It's just not enough for me to be like, I don't trust you. But they bring in Azeez Al-Shaair, who is a much more reliable, I would say, much more reliable tackler that's going to play the run hella well, which enables Christian Harris to kind of be this like weak side linebacker that maybe you could even blitz a little bit. But again, this is a team that doesn't blitz ever. Not a lot. They just don't do it. But it allows him to play a bit more off the ball, and just gives him a bit more space to work and not have to like shoot gaps and maybe take on offensive linemen. But Al-Shaair, when it came to what he did last year for, I believe it was the Titans, again, very good run stuffer, man. His missed tackle rate was 12.3, which you might be like, that's only a 4% difference. When you look at the volume, it kind of matters. Very good at stopping the run, 56 defensive stops last year. Those are just stops that result in either no gain or a negative loss. And he was very much a minimal gain type of tackler. That's just kind of what it was. Let's look at the other guys that they have on the roster at the linebacker position. Of course, you got Henry To'oTo'o, who you're still developing. It wasn't great last year from him. It just wasn't. Did play over 400 snaps, but he was all over the place, man. A 22.9% missed tackle rate, not great. You look at how he was in coverage, and he gave up freaking almost as many yards as snaps on the field. That's kind of insane. That's kind of insane, which leads me to think if you were on the field any longer, then like that number would have been freaking scary. So they're still developing. I don't want to see him on the field. Neville Hewitt reliable veteran at this point. Jack Hansen, I'm glad that this guy is like sticking to the roster. I liked him coming out of Illinois, but he's not a starter. He's just not. He's solid. Oh, well, I mean, I don't want to cap him at that as being just a high-end backup. Like, it's just we haven't seen a ton from him as a starter. But I don't know, man. There's aspects of his game I like. When he played the Jets, to be fair, it was the Jets last year. He actually put in a very, very good effort. He played, I think that was like the most snaps of his career. I mean, even if you go back to like his rookie year, where he played like over 200 snaps, he was a very good run stuffer for this squad. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about it, like, yo, put Jack Hansen over Toa Toa. Unless Toa Toa takes a significant, like, leap. You got Delshon Phillips, not too familiar with him. Again, wasn't the biggest Jamal Hill fan. To me, he screams practice squad, develop. Jacob Phillips, injuries have kind of screwed him the last couple of years, but you know, at least you got a reliable special teamer if he can stick on the field. Not familiar with Tyreek Barnes, who was a UDFA out of Illinois. Wow. Actually, I'm kind of curious. We're going to take a look if I had him. Because typically, sometimes on my draft guide, I won't have like evals for everybody. I just can't get to everybody. But guys that maybe pop out in terms of their testing, and I also put down their analytics, I'd like to at least see. So Tyreek Barnes here, he was linebacker 44, 6'1", 231. Ran a 4.59, so watch out. There was some good explosive numbers. And for the most part, actually, his analytics were fine. So interesting. Maybe that is a guy to watch out for. Max Tooley, I believe, was Arizona State. Let's see. Where do I have Tooley at here? Max. Here, we're just gonna Control F. All right. No, he was BYU. Excuse me. He was here at linebacker 39, so he was a little bit ahead of Barnes. But he comes in at 6'2", 226. Also ran a 4.59. Also had good explosive numbers. I wouldn't say that the agility numbers were great, but they weren't awful. Missed tackle rate was pretty high with him. He was very much a minimal gain type of guy at BYU. So I think both are probably long. I mean, both are obviously long shots to make the roster, but I'm kind of intrigued to see who maybe sticks to the practice squad there. Let's go ahead. Let's move to the secondary. It's probably outside of edge, it's probably the most fun, talented unit to talk about. Derek Stanley's coming out party was last year. Hopefully you were invited because it was hella fun. It was hella good. He did miss a couple of games last season. That was with a hamstring injury, which, hey, to note, there was a bit of injury concern with him coming out of LSU, but when he was on the field for those 11 games, he was phenomenal. 6 pass breakups, 5 interceptions, averaged half an interception per game. That's great. That's nutty. The completion rate allowed 53.8%, just phenomenal. He is perfect for like more matching concepts. You want him to take advantage of just that elite athleticism that he has. Playing next to him, I have here slated as Kamari Lassiter, but it's honestly a big toss-up. It's wide open. Could be Jeff Okudah, could be CJ Henderson. I lean with Lassiter just simply because he was the first pick. Not the first round pick. They didn't have that, but their first pick in the draft. So it'll be fascinating. I also he could be someone that starts early in the slot, but I mean, they brought back Desmond Keene, and Desmond Keene is a relatively solid slot player. Didn't play a ton of snaps last year. He was another guy, I believe, had some injury woes. Regardless, only played 7 games, and but was really good. Was really good. A lot of completion rate that was pretty darn high, but that's going to happen in the slot. but 2 pass breakups, didn't allow a touchdown. He also gives you some pass rushing upside if you do have him come in as blitzer. And honestly, he's a better option than Miles Bryant in the slot. Though Kamari Lassiter could end up, again, maybe starting in the slot. And you have either CJ Henderson or Jeff Okudah start there on the outside. Jalen Pitre, he is just getting better and better and better and better. This is a guy that he's just got a great nose for the football. Doesn't necessarily play a lot in the box, which is kind of where I like him the best. But having him come downhill, watch out, could be nuts. With a healthy Jimmy Ward, I think he does play a bit more in the box this season. Ward just has that flexibility to play in the slot and play in the box and play deep. Pitre honestly has a very similar flexibility to him, but I think Pitre plays a bit more physical of a game, not by much. I mean, Ward's got that dog in him too, but I think you're dealing with probably one of the better safety duos in the NFL. Not to say they're elite, they're not, but they're definitely hella solid. Let's talk about the depth here. Jumping over, let's continue to talk about the corner position, as you got Chris Boyd. He's a special teamer. He's kind of bounced around the league as a special teamer, but he's a good one. Mike Ford could be an interesting name to make the roster. Another guy that's last stop was in Cleveland, but he's just kind of a name. I mean, if you squint hard enough, you might get him confused with MJ Stewart. Tony freaking Troy Pride Jr. still around the league. Hell yeah. I liked him coming out of Notre Dame. I liked him as a day 3 pick. Let's calm down. But I don't know about him being I like him as a cover 3, but if you're gonna play in man, or if you're gonna play maybe like a quarters match concept, I don't know if I like him as much in that. But I mean, he's a practice squad body. Let's be honest. Speaking of MJ Stewart, he is a backup here. Might be a long shot to make the roster. Kind of depends on if Lonnie Johnson sticks with the team. Because Lonnie Johnson, again, very good special teamer. But you look at Stewart, which granted, Stewart banged up last season. He missed time with a shoulder injury. But he is also another guy with a lot of special team snaps under his belt. I know last year was a bit shorter for him, only played in 8 games. But the year before, he had close to 400 special team snaps. So it's again, we're talking about special teamers at this point. Eric Murray keeps sticking to this roster. I don't know how. Last year, he did only play in 6 games. That was because of a knee injury. But I kind of feel like he's a long shot. I feel like Lonnie Johnson probably gets slotted in there. Lonnie Johnson or MJ Stewart, one of the two. Kalen Bullock, I talked a little bit about as being that center field option. I think it's a good fit when they go to cover, cover 3, or at least they fade cover 3. Brandon Hill, I think he was a pretty good athlete coming out of Pittsburgh. That was about it. I don't think there was much to talk about. Again, 2023 draft feels like a lifetime ago. Can't remember too much from it, but another guy that's kind of on the outside looking in. So I mean, I feel good about the roll of the dice at cornerback too. That you have 3 guys that you're like, hey, 2 of these guys were former top 10 picks. The other guy we just drafted in the 2nd round this past year. You got to think one of them sticks. So that's why I'm not too worried about the cornerback 2 position, the outside corner position. And again, more of my concern, more of my worry is with the run defense. But the run defense does get aided, at least schematically, by what D'Amico likes to do when it comes to playing single high, stacking the box with a little bit with an extra defender. So you're just going to be better against the run in that regard. So the run defense grade does get bumped up a little bit, despite me not feeling the greatest about what they have on the interior. But again, Azeez Al-Shaair he's good at helping clean up and even taking on blocks. So it's the defense still should be relatively good. But let's go ahead. Let's get to what you're here for. Let's talk how they're going to do in 2024. So last season, this team had the 8th easiest schedule, and I think the difficulty curve is going to get ramped up in 2024. I have them having the 4th most difficult schedule in the NFL, but of course, we always project the ceiling first for this team, and they got a lot of ascendant players, a lot of young players that played good, and you got to imagine that they're only going to play better, and let's not act like they didn't add a couple of superstars in former Minnesota Vikings, Stephon Diggs. I know he previously played for the Bills, but former Viking, and Danielle Hunter. So let's project the ceiling. I do think there's a good chance that they split with the Colts. So I'm going to give the Colts the season opener. And I mean, to be fair, they lost last year in week 2 to the Colts. So I'm going to give that. I'm going to give the Colts the victory there. But I do think their first home game of the season, bam, they're going to knock out the Bears. Bears, a team that's kind of where the Texans were last year. Minnesota Vikings, Sam Darnold now at the helm. We're going to see no J.J. McCarthy. Not that J.J. McCarthy would change what I think the Vikings may be this season. They've had unfortunately, a lot of woes at corner, with a lot of that being out of their hands. So I think Texans is kind of an easy pick there. You got the Jags. Question is, do they split with the Jags? Will the Jags be a good team next season? But I mean, hey, the Jags last year opened up the year 8-3, and then it went all downhill very quick. But to be fair, part of that was injury, part of that was ineffectiveness by the play, just the pass catchers. Part of that was ineffectiveness from, well, Press Taylor. But I'm gonna say that they do split with the Jags, and I'm gonna just give the Jags the home win. We got the Buffalo Bills. This is going to be a tough one, but it's at home, and we're projecting the ceiling. Let's give it. Let's say, hey, Tennessee, they are here. They have arrived. Patriots, they just but traded Matt Judon. I fully expect this team to be picking early in the draft next year, so we're going to go ahead, give that to the Texans. Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, 2 quarterbacks that did really well in their first full season as a starter. To be fair, one was a rookie and one was sitting behind Aaron Rodgers for a hell of a long time. I think this one's in Lambeau. I'm going to go ahead, give it to the Packers. I am going to give the Texans the home win over the Colts. The Jets, Aaron Rodgers could be a difficult one, but hey, man, this Houston team's they're going to win some difficult games on the road. Though last season that didn't actually work out to his benefit, or at least CJ Stroud's benefit. His worst game of the season came against that defense. So, I mean, you gotta believe Bobby Slowick is gonna. And to be fair, Stroud got concussed in the game. Yeah, let's do it. Let's send it. I'm also gonna give them the home win over the Lions. Again, we're projecting ceiling here, but I'm gonna go ahead and say Dallas wins in AT&T Stadium. When it came to Tennessee last year, they did manage to sweep Tennessee. I do think Will Levis might be a little bit better. I think there's a lot of positive happening in Tennessee, but we might have to wait a year. So I'm going to give the Texans the win, and I'm actually going to say that they sweep the Titans. Man, my freaking Dolphins against the Texans. I don't want to talk about this game. But you know what? My Dolphins? Oh, man. I mean, Texans are coming off a bye. The Dolphins are good at running the football, but also the offensive line could be a bit pants. We're going to go with that. We're going to let the Chiefs take the win in Arrowhead. I'm going to give you a win over Baltimore. And again, said I was going to sweep the Titans for you. That puts the ceiling at 11. I don't know if I love that. I'd rather have a 12-win ceiling. I think 12 wins. So let's project another hard win here. I'm gonna give you the win over the Cowboys. Let's be honest. Cowboys are essentially the Dolphins of the NFC East. Though the Cowboys were doing it first before the Dolphins were. So 12 wins. I think 12 wins is a very viable ceiling for this squad. It's very tough to get to that 13, 14 wins. But 12, I think, is within reason. However, this schedule is more difficult. So when it comes to my projection for the Houston Texans, I know a lot of people aren't going to like this. I got them at 10-7. That's right. Well, what do you mean? We were just 10-7 last year and we're only going to get better. Sure, we're maybe weak at a spot here or two, but the coaching will help fill that in. You got a much harder schedule. It's a much, much harder schedule with very hard road games. Like, again, we're talking road games against the Packers, the Jets, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, the Cowboys, the Chiefs. Like, come on. I mean, Baltimore, that's not a gimme either. I don't know if any of these games are international. I wish they would tell me if any of these games were international. Regardless, though, I think 10-7 with a much harder schedule is reasonable. I think that's still good enough to potentially win the division. I still think that's good enough to make the playoffs. I think that's fair. And I like it. I like it. I like it a lot. Regardless, you let me know what you think, Texans fans, in the comment section below. If you want to check out some of my other deep dives, maybe check out my deep dive on the Indianapolis Colts. I'll leave that right here. Or you can check out some of my summer scouting for the 2025 NFL draft class. But as always, until next time, you be easy, my friends. Later.